The hallway smelled like metal and fear. Jake Carter, a human engineer, walked down the narrow corridor of the prison station. He had been called in to fix a broken power grid. Nothing exciting, just another long day. But something about this station felt strange, cold, silent, too quiet. As he passed the cells, he noticed that most of them were empty. All except one. The last cell held something. Or someone. Jake slowed down. Inside the dimly lit holding cell sat a girl, or at least, she looked like one. Her skin was not like any species he'd seen before. Pale gray, almost silver. Covered in small, rough scales. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her knees, and her long black hair fell over her face. 2 guards stood outside her cell, talking quietly. "Still here?" One of them muttered. "Transport's delayed again." "No one wants to take that freak," the other replied. Jake tilted his head. "What did she do?" Both guards looked at him. One snorted. "She didn't do anything. That's the problem. She's not even dangerous, just ugly. Too ugly to sell, too weird to keep. She scares the clients and the staff." Jake stepped closer to the glass. "She has a name? Who cares?" The guard said, "We call her the ugly one." Inside the cell, the girl lifted her head slowly. Her eyes glowed faint blue. Not bright, not powerful, just sad. Her lips didn't move, but Jake heard her whisper like a ghost carried on air. "Don't look at me." He blinked. "What? Don't?" "Look at me," she repeated. "You'll scream like the others did." Jake didn't scream. He looked at her not with disgust or fear, but curiosity. She was different, yes, but not horrifying. In fact, something about her face looked delicate under the rough surface. Fragile even. Who is she really? Jake asked again. The guards didn't answer. They walked away, muttering. Jake stood there, staring through the thick security glass. The girl stared back, unmoving. A light flickered above her cell, casting her shadow across the walls like a broken wing. Suddenly, the lights went out. The whole station dropped into darkness. Jake cursed under his breath and pulled out his toolkit. Emergency lights blinked. On, red and soft. The power grid had failed completely again. He walked to the control room and got to work. But his mind kept drifting back to the girl. Why was she still here? Why didn't she fight or speak? Why did her voice sound human? 30 minutes later, the emergency system stabilized, but the long-range comms were still down. The prison transport ship wasn't coming tonight. The storm outside had gotten worse. The air outside the station was full of thick blue dust, a natural ion storm. Deadly for ships. The station commander shouted, "Everyone evacuate to the shelter pods. We're shutting power in 1 hour." Jake looked around. What about the prisoner? "She's not a priority," the commander replied coldly. "Leave her. Her pod's already deactivated." Jake's eyes widened. "You're leaving her here? With no heat? No food?" "She's not human, son. She'll survive, or she won't. Either way, not our problem." Jake clenched his jaw. He didn't like it. He looked at the access panel near her cell and made a choice. He returned to her cell. She hadn't moved. Jake tapped the glass. "Hey, what's your name?" She didn't answer. "I'm not here to hurt you. I don't think you should be left here to die." Her eyes narrowed. "Why do you care?" Jake shrugged. "I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing people thrown away." He took a deep breath, then entered the override code. The cell door hissed open slowly. She didn't move. Jake stepped inside. "Come on. There's a storm coming. I have a shelter." She flinched as he came closer. "You'll regret this." Jake paused. "I might, but not today." He held out his hand. After a long, painful silence, she reached out and touched it. Her skin was cold, rough like stone, but her fingers trembled. Like any scared girl's, He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stared at him in shock. No one ever touched me before. Not without gloves. Jake smiled gently. Then maybe it's time someone did. She followed him out of the cell, and in that moment, in the dim red lights of the dying station, the ugly one no longer looked so ugly. She looked human. The wind outside howled like a beast. The Einstorm was now in full rage, shaking the walls of the abandoned station. Blue lightning lit up the skies, and the ground trembled with every blast of static energy. No ships were flying. No signals. "We're getting through." Jake held the alien girl's arm as they moved through the hallway. Her steps were slow, weak. She hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe longer. She didn't complain, though. She just followed him. The other workers had already taken off in escape pods. Jake had stayed behind alone with her. "What's your name?" he asked again as they reached the outer door. She didn't look at him. "I don't have one." He frowned. "Everyone has a name." "I was born in a lab," she whispered. "My kind weren't given names. We were made for testing. Some were sold, others thrown away." Jake felt something twist in his chest. He didn't know what to say, so he opened the door to his shelter cabin. Instead, it was small, just a metal room built into the rock beneath the station. A bunk, a heater, and a storage unit. Not fancy, but warm and safe. She stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the place like it was a trap. "You live here?" she asked. Jake nodded. "Only when I'm working long shifts." She walked to the corner and sat down on the floor, far from the bed. Far from him. "You can sit on the bed, you know," he offered. She looked away. "I'd rather not," he sighed. "Suit yourself." Jake turned on the heater, opened a ration pack, and poured warm broth into a cup. He walked over and handed it to her. She stared at it suspiciously. "Is it drugged?" "No, just soup." She sniffed it once, then drank slowly. Jake sat across from her, watching her carefully. Her scales shimmered faintly in the heater's glow. He still didn't understand why everyone found her terrifying. Sure, she was different, but there was something soft behind her silence, something broken. "So, why were you locked up?" he asked gently. She wiped her mouth. "Because no one wants to see my face." Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's not a reason." She looked him in the eyes for the first time. "In my world it is." Silence fell between them. Then came a knock. Jake stood quickly, reaching for the monitor. It wasn't a person. It was the comms panel flickering to life, blinking red. "Prisoner transfer canceled. Transport destroyed in ion storm." Jake's heart skipped. "Your ship, it's gone." She nodded slowly, like she already knew. "They never planned to come." Jake looked at her. "That means you're stuck here." "With you," she said in a low voice. "In a locked shelter. During a storm." He suddenly felt very aware of how close they were. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake said quickly. She smirked, but it wasn't a happy smile. "That's what the last human said before they sold me." Jake went quiet. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the roof. Suddenly, the heater buzzed. The power grid dropped again. The heat died. "Damn," Jake muttered, rushing to the wall panel. "Backups aren't holding." She didn't move, just pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the floor. "I'll get it running," he said. "No need," she replied softly. "I'm used to the cold." Jake turned to her. "But I'm not letting you freeze again." He took a blanket from the bunk and laid it on the floor beside her, then sat down next to her, rubbing his arms. "I thought you were smarter than this," she said. "What do you mean?" "You just brought a strange alien girl into your shelter during a power outage, with no one to hear you scream," Jake chuckled. "You don't scare me." "You should be scared," she whispered, voice shaking. He looked at her seriously. "Are you dangerous?" She looked away. I don't know. And for some reason, Jake believed her. He reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers. This time, she didn't pull away. The storm screamed outside like a dying world dot inside this small metal shelter. The air was cold, the heater dead, and two strangers sat side by side, human and alien, both silent, both pretending not to notice how close they had become. Jake's breath misted in front of him. He rubbed his hands together, trying to keep warm. Across from him, the girl didn't shiver. Her body seemed used to the cold, but there was something in her eyes, something tired, like she was holding pain deeper than her bones. I've got one emergency blanket, Jake said, pulling it from the supply box. It's heat reactive. It keeps in body warmth. He unfolded it slowly. She watched him. You need it more than I do. Jake glanced at her. We'll share. She blinked. Share? He nodded. You don't have to sleep on the floor. The bed's not big, but it's better than freezing. She hesitated, eyes narrowing. Why are you doing this? Jake gave a small shrug. Because you're alive. That's reason enough. The girl didn't move. She just stared at the thin blanket in his hands like it was made of fire. I don't sleep beside others, she whispered. Jake offered a small smile. First time for everything. He climbed into the bed, scooting to one side. Then he held out the blanket. She didn't move. I'm not going to touch you, he said quietly. Unless you want me to. That sentence hung in the air like ice. Finally she stood. Slowly, stiffly, like walking to the bed took more courage than breaking out of prison. She climbed in beside him, leaving a good space between them. Jake laid the blanket across both their bodies and turned away to give her privacy. The silence was heavy, then her voice came, barely a whisper. No one's ever seen my face and stayed. Jake didn't turn. I'm still here, she paused. Then said, they told me I was made wrong. My creators said I was a design failure, a mix of species no one wanted, too big, too scaled. Not soft enough to be useful. Not strong enough to fight. Jake looked at the ceiling, heart aching. Whoever said that was cruel. She turned her head. You don't know what I look like. He finally turned to face her. The soft glow from the wall lamp cast shadows across her sharp cheekbones, silver-scaled jaw, and glowing blue eyes. He smiled gently. I do now. She blinked, once, twice, then looked away fast. You're not afraid? No, Jake said softly. Should I be? She let out a quiet breath. I don't understand you. That's okay. Most people don't understand me either. They lay in silence for a moment. Then the storm cracked above like the sky itself was breaking. She flinched. Jake didn't miss it. You okay? I don't like storms, she whispered. They used to lock us outside when it rained, said it toughened our skin. Jake's stomach turned. No one's locking you out tonight. Suddenly, she moved closer, just an inch. But enough to feel the heat from his body. Her hand brushed his under the blanket. She froze. He didn't move. After a long pause, she whispered, your skin is warm. Jake gave a small smile. Yours is cold, but not unpleasant. She stared at him. Then, without warning, she whispered, what's your name? Jake. She nodded slowly. I'll remember that. He glanced at her. And you? Can I give you one? She blinked. A name? Yeah. How about Lyra? She looked confused. What does it mean? It's a star, one that shines even in a dead sky. She looked away quickly, but Jake saw the corner of her lips twitch. She didn't say it out loud, but she accepted it. From now on, she was Lyra. The storm outside roared on, but inside that tiny shelter, under one thin blanket, two broken souls shared something neither of them had felt in years: warmth. The storm had passed by morning, but the cold still clung to the walls. Jake opened his eyes slowly. He didn't remember falling asleep. The soft sound of breathing reached his ears close. Too close. He turned his head. Lyra was lying next to him, her face turned toward his, just inches away. Her eyes were closed. One hand was resting against his chest, fingers lightly curled. Jake didn't move. He didn't want to wake her. Not just because she looked peaceful, but because she looked safe. For once, maybe even human. But then her eyes opened. Bright blue. Alert. Confused. She pulled her hand back quickly. I didn't mean to. It's okay, Jake said gently. She sat up, pressing the blanket around herself like a shield. You were warm, she said, not looking at him. I didn't mean to get that close, Jake smiled. No one minds warmth when it's freezing. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly stood and walked to the small mirror above the water tank. She stared at her reflection for a long time, silent. Then she touched her face. Her fingers traced the lines of her scales. Her jaw, the odd ridges on her temples. Jake sat up and watched her quietly. I used to scratch them, she said suddenly. Jake blinked. Scratch what? My scales, she replied. I thought if I could peel them off, maybe I'd look normal underneath. His chest tightened. Did it work? She shook her head slowly. No, it just hurt. Silence. Jake rose and walked toward her slowly. He stopped beside her, looking at the same reflection. I don't think you need to be normal, he said. Lyra's eyes met his in the mirror. You don't understand. On my planet, beauty meant value, worth. The smooth-skinned ones got adopted, protected, chosen. The rest of us were called failures. Jake clenched his fists. That's not beauty. That's cruelty in disguise. She tilted her head. But isn't it the same on Earth? Pretty faces get more chances. Even humans treat difference like disease. Jake looked down. She wasn't wrong, but he still said, not all of us. Lyra turned around slowly, the blanket still wrapped around her. Then why didn't you leave me in the cell like the others? Jake looked straight into her eyes. Because I saw you. She frowned. Saw what? Not a creature, not a failure, just someone alone and hurting. Her expression broke for a second, just 1 second. Then she looked away fast. I don't cry, she whispered. They trained that out of us. Jake stepped closer. Maybe you don't have to be what they made you. She looked up at him, almost angry. And what am I supposed to be? A pet? A trophy? A monster that sleeps quietly beside her human savior? Jake took a breath. No, just Lyra. The name made her blink. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. I've never had a name, she said. Never belonged to anything that didn't own me. Jake gently reached out and touched her hand. You don't belong to me. But you're safe here. That's a promise. Her hand stayed in his this time. Not pulling away. Jake could feel how cold she still was. Not just her skin, but something deeper. Like her whole life had been spent without warmth. She looked down. Do you really not find me ugly? Jake stepped closer, now just inches away. No, she raised her head slowly. Her eyes searched his face, as if waiting for disgust to rise, for fear to show. But Jake only looked back, calm, steady. He raised one hand and touched the side of her face, where the scales met soft skin beneath her eye. Her breath caught. You're not what I expected, she whispered. Jake smiled. Neither are you. Outside, the wind had died down. But inside the shelter, something else was just beginning. A fragile trust. A new bond. A connection neither of them could name yet, but both could feel. Not all beauty glows. Not all monsters growl. Some just need to be seen. The silence didn't last long. By mid-morning, Jake's unit flickered to life with a soft ping. A red message glowed across the screen. Sector scan initiated. Fugitive alert. Species unknown. Armed drones deployed. Jake stared at the screen, his heart pounding. No, not now. Lyra looked up from the corner where she was sipping warm broth. "What is it?" Jake turned slowly. "They're searching this sector." "For you," Lyra froze. "They shouldn't." "No, I'm here. The storm, it cleared." "Which means the scanners are back online," Jake said. He checked the external sensors. "Patrol drones, at least 3. Maybe more." Her hand trembled as she set down the cup. "If they find me, they'll take me. Or kill me." Jake walked over and knelt beside her. "I won't let that happen." She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "You can't fight them." "I don't have to," he said. "But I can hide you." Lyra shook her head. "They have heat vision, DNA sniffers. I'm not even supposed to exist in their records, but they're still hunting me." Jake stood and grabbed his toolkit. "Then we're going to make sure they don't find anything." He ran to the back of the shelter, where a narrow hatch led into a crawl space carved into the stone. It wasn't very big, but it was shielded from most scanners. He'd used it once during a chemical leak drill. "Climb in here," he said, prying the hatch open. Lyra stared at the dark hole. "That's a tomb. It's a hiding place," Jake replied. "And I'll be right outside. I'll keep them busy." She hesitated, then whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Jake turned and looked her in the eyes. "Because I don't want the only person who's ever shared a blanket with me to be taken like trash." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, but she climbed into the crawl space instead. Jake handed her a thermal wrap, then sealed the hatch just as the drone scanner pinged a new signal. A soft buzz filled the air. They were close. Jake stepped outside the shelter, the icy wind cutting across his face. The first drone hovered above him, red lights flashing beneath its belly. A voice crackled from its speaker. "State your identity." "This shelter is under scan." "Engineer Jake Carter," he replied calmly. "Station repair crew, ID code transmitting now." The drone paused, scanning him. "Power loss detected. No heat signatures other than yours." "Purpose of stay?" Jake lied smoothly. "Power grid failure during storm." "I stayed behind for manual." "Override. This sector is under fugitive protocol." "Are you harboring non-registered life forms?" Jake narrowed his eyes. "Just me and a broken heater," the drone hummed. Then another joined it. Together, they began scanning the rocks around. The shelter dot inside the crawl space. Lyra held her breath. The stone pressed against her back. Her heart raced. Every beep, every hum from the drones felt like a countdown to death. She closed her eyes. Jake stood still outside, his hand on the tool belt. "I can open the shelter for inspection, but you'll find nothing." A long pause, then the drones retreated. Slowly, their lights fading. The moment they were out of view, Jake rushed back inside and tore open the hatch. "Lyra!" She blinked up at him, shivering. He reached in and pulled her out, holding her close. "They're gone," he said, rapping his arms around her. "You're okay." She buried her face in his chest. "You lied for me." Jake nodded. "I would again." Lyra's voice shook. "You're risking your life for a girl you barely know." Jake looked down at her. "Maybe I want to know her better." She pulled back slightly, just enough to look into his eyes. "You're the only person who ever wanted that," she whispered. Jake gave a small smile. "Then let me be the first, and not the last." For the first time, Lyra reached up and touched his cheek, not with fear or hesitation, but with something warm. Maybe it was trust, or maybe it was something deeper. Outside, the drones vanished into the clouds. Inside, the bond between human and alien grew stronger. The next storm came without warning. Jake was outside fixing the solar relay when the wind slammed into him like a wall. Dust, sharp as glass, cut across his face. He grabbed the edge of the shelter and pulled himself back inside, coughing hard. Lyra stood in the center of the room, watching the sky darken through the small window. Her eyes looked almost silver, now reflecting the rolling clouds above. "It's not a regular storm," she said softly. "It's a surge. It could last for days." Jake wiped his hands and locked the door. Then we waited out. Together. The power flickered, then cut out completely. The air inside cooled fast. The soft hum of heat vanished, leaving only silence. They looked at each other. No heater. "No backup," Jake said. Lyra stepped forward. "There's only one way we survive. This kind of cold." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Cuddling for warmth?" She didn't smile. "Yes," Jake blinked. "You're serious?" Her voice dropped. "You don't understand what my body does, my kind. We don't just retain heat, we exchange it." Jake paused. "Exchange?" "If I touch you," she said carefully, "my body will try to balance our temperatures. Yours will rise. Mine will fall. It's instinct. We weren't meant to live alone." Jake nodded slowly. "I'm not afraid." Lyra looked unsure. "You should be. No one's touched me without armor since I was created." He took a step closer. "Then maybe it's time someone did." They lay down on the narrow bed together, the emergency blanket wrapped over them. At first, she didn't move. She just stared at the ceiling, her hands curled close to her chest. Jake could feel her shivering on the inside. Not from cold. From something older, deeper. After a long silence, her voice came, soft and shaking. "Do you know what I was made for?" Jake turned to look at her. "No." She kept her eyes on the ceiling. "I wasn't born. I was engineered. My body, my skin, my organs all made in the lab. They were trying to make a hybrid. One that could survive extremes. Radiation, cold, pain. I was version 11. All the others died in testing." Jake stayed silent, letting her speak. "They called me a success, but not good enough. Not soft enough, not beautiful enough, so they sold me to a trader. Said I might be useful to someone who needed something different." Her voice cracked. "I ran. Got caught. Got locked in that cell. And now I'm here. With you. And I don't know why I'm still alive." Jake reached out and gently placed a hand on hers. "You're alive because you deserve to be." Lyra turned her head slowly to face him. "Why don't you fear me?" Jake's voice was steady. "Because you're not a monster." She studied him for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Jake, I feel something when I'm near you." Jake didn't move. "What do you feel?" "Warm," she whispered, "and scared. Like something inside me is waking up, and I don't know if it will break me or save me." Jake smiled gently. "Maybe it's both." The storm outside roared louder, shaking the walls. Inside. Lyra's hand slid into his. Her fingers no longer cold. Their foreheads touched. And for the first time, she said the words she never thought she'd say. "I don't want to be alone anymore," Jake whispered back. "You're not." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The warmth between them was enough. Enough to melt years of fear. Enough to survive the cold night. Enough to start something new. The storm passed in the early hours. Only silence remained. Not the heavy silence of fear, or the cold stillness of space, but a quiet filled with something new, something soft, something alive. Jake opened his eyes slowly, blinking at the pale light coming through the shelter window. His arms were wrapped around her, around Lyra. Her breathing was steady. Her skin, once ice cold, now felt warm against his chest. She was still asleep. For a moment, Jake didn't move. He just watched her. No longer did she look like the strange, dangerous girl locked in a cell. No longer did her scales seem frightening. They shimmered faintly in the light like starlight on water. She stirred. And then, slowly her eyes opened, bright, blue clear. She looked up at him. And didn't pull away. "Still here," she whispered. Jake smiled. "Told you I would be." Lyra sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. She rubbed her eyes, almost unsure if she was still dreaming. I didn't expect this, she said softly. Jake sat up too. What did you expect? I thought you'd run, or regret it. I thought you'd see me clearly, and change your mind. Jake reached out, brushing a lock of her hair aside. I did see you clearly. She blinked, and I stayed, he added. Lyra looked around the small room. This shelter isn't much. It wasn't meant for two, Jake said, glancing at the narrow bed. But now, I don't think I want it any other way. She lowered her gaze, cheeks darkening slightly. Where do we go from here? Jake stood and walked to the control panel. We fix the comms, wait for the patrols to move on. Then we find somewhere safe, somewhere you don't have to hide. Lyra hugged her knees to her chest. There's no such place. Not for someone like me. There is, Jake said. We'll make it, together. She looked up at him, searching his face for doubt. There was none. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood and walked over to him, slowly, carefully. I was designed to survive alone, she said. But I want to learn what it means to live with someone. Jake turned to her. Then let's start small. He took her hand. Step 1, he said with a grin. We fix breakfast. Lyra laughed softly, a sound Jake had never heard from her. Light, strange, beautiful. They moved together through the tiny shelter, sharing dry rations and heat packs, joking quietly as the light outside grew brighter. The cold was gone now, but they stayed close anyway. As they sat down side by side on the edge of the bed, Lyra looked at him again, really looked. No fear, no masks, only one question left. Jake, she asked, would you be okay with me staying? I mean, here, with you. For more than just the storm. Jake squeezed her hand. I didn't bring you into this shelter for one night, he said softly. I brought you into my life. Lyra took a breath, then leaned forward and gently rested her forehead against his. No words, just warmth. Just trust. The kind of moment that didn't need to be explained. Outside the world was still wild and cold. But inside that tiny shelter, a bed once meant for one, now belonged to two.